Reunited. In today's programme, massacre in the classroom.
The close-knit town of Dunblane is completely devastated after the dreadful attack by a gunman on a Primary 1 gym class.
I saw my husband cry for the first time. He was just devastated.
How a bereaved father led the fight to change the gun laws and won.
He's a great inspiration that out of tragedy something good can come.
And the RAF heroes who stood up to Stalin.
The blockade of Berlin is due to end as crowds gather at the Russian-British frontier.
66 years on, veterans of the Berlin airlift return to the runway.
It's an amazing thing to think that we poor old codgers may have helped to save us all from World War III.
Dunblane, a quiet cathedral town 30 miles north of Glasgow. Until March the 13th, 1996, few outside Scotland had heard of it. Then, shortly after 9:30 that morning, came an event that shocked the world.
We heard these gunshots in the gym. We looked around and thought, oh, he must just be firing at a target or something. Then he came out through a fire exit and started firing at our huts, and God, we were all petrified.
Word of a gunman on the loose at Dunblane Primary School spread rapidly. Frantic parents, who'd only dropped their children at the gates an hour earlier, rushed back. Among them, university lecturer Mick North, father of 5-year-old pupil Sophie.
Obviously, this was a major incident. There were police roadblocks. We had to get out the car, walk to a hotel, and that began a long period of waiting. Eventually, somebody came in and very briefly said, this incident concerns just one class, Mrs. Mayer's, and of course Mrs. Mayer was Sophie's teacher.
Steve Burney's son was a member of the same class. Steve discovered it was at the centre of the shooting as he drove to the school.
In your head, you'd been thinking all the way that at that point in time, you know, start off with it's a school, one person in a school, 1 in 600 are pretty good odds. And then as you're driving back and you get the news that actually, you know, it is your son's class, then the odds have dropped and you're then down to 1 in 30 and there was multiple fatalities. So you're then thinking, no idea. So I probably broke far too many speed limits to get back as quick as I could.
The parents waited for news. When it came, it was worse than anyone had ever imagined.
16 children have been killed, and 2 adults are also dead.
Among those fatalities was Mick's daughter, Sophie.
My first reaction was simply anger. After that, just numbness. Just going home to a house that was going to be empty. And although I had a number of friends coming around to support me, the feeling was really just emptiness. I mean, just not understanding.
Nancy McLaren's 5-year-old granddaughter Megan was also killed. Nancy was with Megan's parents when they received the news.
My son-in-law got out the police car because they'd given us a lift home, and he got out the police car and they kicked it like a football. He just stood and kicked it and kicked it. They never stopped him, they just let him carry on. He was obviously having to get his frustration out somewhere. I saw my husband cry for the first time in bed that night. He was just devastated. Megan had been a real treasure. She was our first grandchild. We loved her tremendously. I mean, I know everybody loves their grandchildren, but she was our first, and she was my daughter's daughter, and she was very special.
Steve's son was one of the few shooting victims to survive his wounds.
He'd been shot twice. Luckily, it had missed pretty much all his vital organs. It had managed to chip part of his spine, but had not actually done, a couple of millimetres either way. He would have been dead or paralysed. So it was, he was in intensive care for probably about 4 or 5 days, and then he was in hospital for another sort of week or so after that.
Can we just say how grateful we are to all the staff
at the hospital
and all the friends and family?
And can we just give our thoughts with all those parents who weren't as lucky as we were?
Yeah, we're thinking about them.
There is a stillness about Dunblane which still reeks of Wednesday's tragedy. A stillness which became a silence as on the stroke of 9:30 its people, along with the rest of the nation, paused to remember the children and their teacher so grievously lost to them.
Messages of condolence and support came from all over the country, but no words could describe the enormity of the tragedy that had engulfed such a small community. Local musician Ted Christopher saw its devastating impact at first hand.
You walked through Dunblane, nobody spoke to each other, nobody smiled, and it was a really strange thing. People would walk past neighbours, friends, and just sort of nod to each other.
Like many people, Ted believed that the misfit Thomas Hamilton shouldn't have been allowed to possess firearms in the first place. He decided to write an anti-gun protest song and chose to adapt a Bob Dylan classic.
This town will never be the same.
As a musician, I did what musicians do. I mean, I write songs, I sing.
Ted played a recording of his version of Knocking on Heaven's Door to the grieving parents and grandparents. They suggested he release it as a single to spread the anti-gun message far and wide.
Ted obviously felt committed to what he was doing. I thought it was a nice idea, this song, because it brings out that sympathetic, emotional appeal.
The parents of the surviving pupils also agreed to their children singing the chorus.
I just wanted kids to be part of it. It was their friends, their brothers and sisters that they'd lost. Let's do this together and just show the world that we've had enough.
The single got radio airplay and sales boomed. Ted was invited to perform it on Top of the Pops, which gave his young backing singers the chance to meet their pop heroes.
The kids were obviously starstruck. Boyzone were great with them. The Spice Girls walked in, started screaming and ran out towards the kids. So they immediately wanted to sort of embrace the kids.
Knocking on Heaven's Door went straight to #1 just before Christmas. The healing process in Dunblane had barely started, but in a small way at least, this success helped usher it in.
The kids started smiling, so the parents had to start smiling. It didn't wipe out the grief, far from it, but it meant that as well as the grief, there was beginning to be something to balance it up, a wee bit light, a wee bit hope that the future of Dunblane was still there.
It's now nearly 2 decades on, and Ted's version of Knocking on Heaven's Door is about to be performed again, this time at the Dunblane Centre, built for the community with the money donated after the tragedy. Here, the children who were killed are commemorated in specially designed window engravings. Nancy's granddaughter Megan is shown on her beloved roller skates. And Mick's daughter Sophie is remembered by an engraving of her pet, Kit Kat.
Hearing the song again this evening, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to feel. Many things will remind me, obviously, of what happened 18 years ago. This will be one of them. Whether I get emotional about it or not, I'm not sure.
Knocking on heaven's door.
The wee girl in the red dress was absolutely super. I credit to her mother, but she made me cry because I was looking at this wee girl of must be 4 or 5 and thinking of my own. I cried when I saw her singing her heart out.
When you listen to the song and know it's about your child and her friends, it obviously brings out very strong, sad emotions in me. But there are also ones of pride as well, pride in what Ted and the band did. They helped bring a smile back to Dunblane.